Afterwards, it climbs back up to the upper register to another climactic point. Unlike the previous statement of this motive, I've accelerated my rhythmic ascent in measure 12. The original melodic line ascends by 16th notes on beat 3, leading to a high B flat on beat 4. Instead of 16ths, I have doubled the rhythm to 32nd notes, propelling the phrase forward, staying within the harmonic bounds of the measure. This seems to make things more exciting. One final point I would like to make about this movement is that it does not end in an authentic cadence. The written ending is a preparation for the third movement, which I will not be playing this evening. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Schmidt forward to help me play Johann Sebastian Bach's Concerto in G minor, the Adagio movement. Tonight's final work is a concerto composed by Alessandro Marcello. However, the work is published under his younger brother's name, Benedetto. While both brothers were composers, Benedetto was more famous than his older brother and is often recognized as the composer of this work. During the Baroque era, there was a new demand for works that highlighted an individual performer or performers who were accompanied by an orchestra. These works were typically in 3 movements: a fast first, a slow second, and concluding with a fast third. In this work, I would like to focus on how we can use cadential trills throughout the work. As discussed before, trills were often used as a melodic function, emphasizing the movement from dominant to tonic, concluding a phrase. Since the auxiliary notes create a dissonance, it creates tension before resolving. Therefore, cadential trills have a harmonic function as well. I will load the first movement with these cadential trills. From measures 10 to 12, it is noticeable from the crescendo and the melodic line beginning in measure 10 that we are reaching a climactic point in the phrase. We hear that the melodic line is ascending like so. Upon reaching the highest point of the phrase, the melody falls, signaling the end. Here, a trill creates a dissonance before resolving to the tonic C. All of the long trills lasting almost one full beat, throughout the entire first verb movement occur at cadential points. However, these are not the only trills included in the movement. In order to add variation in color to repeated rhythmic motives, I've added half trills. As stated before, C.P.E. Bach considered half trills to be the most attractive of embellishments, though they tend to be the most difficult to place. Since they occur extremely quick, and as mentioned earlier, you must play 4 notes within the allotted time. One example of such a trill occurs in measure 19, after the repeat of the rhythmic motive from measure 17. If I were to continue to play the rhythmic motive without adding any variation, I feel it would become dull. By adding a half trill, I've added some spice to what may have been an otherwise boring phrase, demonstrating the melodic function of a trill. Moving into the second movement, phrases begin to feel much more relaxed and smooth to coincide with the slow tempo. That being said, all of the ornaments added by the editor and myself are ones that enhance the melody, the same way as it did in the Bach, through the use of turns and mordents. The third movement uses very few ornaments, for it is to focus on the performer's technical virtuosity. This does not mean there are no ornaments in this movement. Though few in number, the ornaments in the third movement are very similar to those in the first. They serve a harmonic function rather than a melodic. Another important thing to keep in mind is that the A and B sections repeat. Much like the second movement of the Telemann from earlier, the first repetition of each phrase the performer would exclude any ornamentation, so the melodic line could be clearly heard, and then add them again in the second repetition. I've excluded the repeats tonight, placing all the ornaments into the movement's one and only statement. like to open the hall to questions if there are any.
Who's your favorite Baroque composer?
I would have to say Bach. I really like that second movement, especially with the ornament that I added earlier. The 30-second notes, I was listening to a previous recording of me playing it from last year, and just, I can't listen to it without those 30-second notes. It hits right here, and that's not just saying anything. I just love that part.
How difficult was it picking notes to add these ornaments to?
With that mindset from the Romantic era, it's very difficult to add ornaments. It's just a lot of trial and error. You know, I found it very difficult at first to add them in. I needed some assistance in doing so, but afterwards I started getting the feel for it and understanding, okay, what will work here? But like I said, just got to take it to the practice room and just try and try and try.
Marcus, you presented so nice, and I am not an expert, but I could understand part of it. Your music is very enjoyable. But my question is, you've done so much research in this area. So what was the sources for your research? Where did you get them?
My primary source, well, I used Grove's Music Online a lot for a lot of the terms for ornaments and what was Baroque. But my main sources were some of the books by Robert Donington, a lot of Baroque ornamentation and music of the Baroque era.
Did you find a lot of discrepancies in your research about what some composers thought should be done and the way in which some of the ornaments were handled?
Surprisingly, no. A lot of them contain mostly the same information. Some included quotes from other composers as to what the certain rules were, but mostly they contain the same information if they included the rules.
Were all the ornamentations treated the same, like the same instruments?
I would assume so. A lot of it just was general information because a lot of it stemmed from vocal performance. So I think a lot of the new techniques that we're seeing now that has been organized are now used on all instruments.
When you were coming up with more ornaments for this, did you also look at other additions than just yours? Did they have suggested ornaments in there? Did you use any of those?
I would often listen to recordings of other players like John Mack and some other oboists and listen to their repetitions. For the Telemann, I actually found the recording of a flute playing it, and it's very different than what I have done. Sorry.
How did you decide on which repertoire pieces to use?
With the Telemann, it was something I had not played before. Everything else I'd played before. I really enjoyed the Bach, like I stated earlier in a previous performance. And the Marcello, I felt was one of those, from doing a little bit of research through some classes that I've had, would be a perfect, virtuosic work to focus on. And the Telemann would just expand my creative bounds because normally I'm constrained to what's written on the page.
You mentioned that there were sort of maybe different national styles, perhaps, and everything, to ornamentation, perhaps. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly how you put this, but did you find that maybe French players would have a different way of perhaps approaching the Cajatura, or favor more of one way than maybe a German?
There was mention of some of the difference. I didn't dive into that much detail just for the presentation. A lot of that would have been a lot more extensive research.
What was the most difficult thing in preparing the repertoire?
The most difficult part was adding the ornaments. Like I said, my improvisational skills are very minimal, if non-existent, so being able to identify where in the line to add an ornament or where to change articulations was very difficult. Tommy?
Where did you start looking, like in the music, to where you could add an ornament? Like, say you started fresh, where would you look first?
I would just play through each phrase and just listen. A lot of the times there were some sort of cues, like at the top of the phrase, you can maybe add a warden. I've done, trying to think of some of the examples. Let me grab the Telemann real quick. Primarily, I used them a lot in repetitions, just because it would add some variance. Because remember being taught in music theory that you don't want to have too many repetitions of the same thing over and over, otherwise it gets boring. So I usually start with, okay, where does something repeat? Now, what could I do at this measure? Say, for example, like in the Telemann, or at the penultimate measure, like I stated in the example, adding that mordent was just something. Okay, this can be done quickly. It's not too close to the end of the phrase. It's not the beginning, so this rhythmic motive can be clearly heard. But it just adds something a little different that makes it stand out and draws attention to it.
Were there times when, I guess, either you were practicing or performing that you just went through and just tried to use the improvisatory, like improvising what ornaments you use as you went through without kind of looking at it first and deciding where they would go?
Yeah, with the Telemann in the fourth measure, I added some slides into there. We kind of heard the da 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 da. I kind of threw that in there. I was just thinking, this just sounds way too simple, so I just kind of played around with it, turns, mordents, all that. I just found a slide worked best for me. And I've tried some stuff at the end of cadences, but I just felt that it wasn't right for the era.
You might have hinted at this earlier, but I'm just curious as to why you picked Baroque ornamentation as your
As long as I can remember, since I started playing in high school and started having eras as a solo repertoire, the Baroque era just kind of fascinated me. I always classified myself as a Baroque player with more of a romantic sound, just that longing of emotion. But I just like this technical spot. It's something that portrays an emotion. I'd rather not vary back and forth between them in a piece. And just this decoration, just making it sound flashy and interesting, always has just interested me.
You said you've, in the Baroque area, you found information about the affects.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any ornamentations that hinted at a specific affect?
Normally the appoggiatura was a sighing effect, just kind of that longing